We didn't get to do this last week. I'm very excited we get to do it now, but it's time for DC in the 80s. DC in the 80s. And tonight we're talking about one of the very first comic books I ever read. DC Comics presents number 91. It's a Superman and Captain Comet team up. First of all, who is Captain Comet? He's one of those Adam Strange-esque type characters. He's one of the earliest mutants. He predates the X-Men by 12 years. He was born with his powers. He has the mind and powers of the future man, if that makes sense. But DC Comics Presents at this time was a Superman team-up book. There's not a lot about Captain Comet, but this book came out at the tail end of 1985 when Halley's Comet was all the rage. So the whole book is wrapped around that. So, of course, Captain Comet. I read this book, this issue, so many damn times. It's got Brainwave in it. It's got Captain Comet and Superman, obviously, and it's got this other random dude right there. So it starts off, Superman's fighting Brainwave, and I just always love this doofy-ass shit in these books where, like, Brainwave makes a giant gun, so Superman flies through the gun, and he shoots Superman out backwards. Like, that's his plan. It's so silly. And he defeats Brainwave. He tries to just take a water tower and cover him up with it, right? But then Brainwave just disappears out of nowhere. Turns out that Brainwave has just lost his abilities. That's right, he's used his power too much. His power comes from this helmet that he puts on. And he can basically cause things to happen by thinking. So he decides that, well, I'm losing my powers, but maybe I can do one more final brainstorm. His idea is to go after Captain Comet. Captain Comet has the future man's mind. Right? They do this little bit in here where they're like, hey, this is the way that... Because Captain Comet just so happens to be at a museum in Metropolis, and they're like, hey, this is the way we think future mankind's supposed to be, but you don't look like that. You look like a 20th century man. He's like, oh, yeah, that's been a fun mystery. Anyway, Brainwave gets Captain Comet's... he gets his interest by putting out this developing threat of menace, right? So Captain Comet shows up to try to stop whatever's going on, and Brainwave uses the last bit of energies that he can get from this helmet to steal Captain Comet's powers. Meanwhile, Captain Comet, now that he no longer has this power to subconsciously make him appear as a 20th century man, becomes the future man. He loses some of his intelligence, and he kind of becomes this giant monster who now is going after Brainwave and chasing him. Meanwhile, Clark Kent in his apartment meets one of his neighbors. His neighbor is supremely anxious and worried about the Halley's Comet and thinks it's going to destroy everybody, just like the dinosaurs, or it's going to make everybody act crazy or something. So Brainwave, trying to go back to the scene of the crime, trying to find Superman, it takes his battle. He's being chased by this evil Captain Comet monster, and he loses his helmet, and Clark's neighbor picks it up. And so Superman gets involved. He gets involved. It's some nice, fun, old-school DC Comics fighting. And while Clark's neighbor, I can't remember the dude's name. I'm going to look it up real quick. It is Mr... Can't find it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He puts on the helmet, and his anxiety about the comet making everybody go crazy is something that will be triggered later on. So as they're fighting, Brainwave comes up to Superman and says, yo, man, this is what happened. I stole Captain Comet's power, and by stealing that evolutionary power, like, now he's evolved and he doesn't have the intelligence, and that's why he's fighting you. Meanwhile, this dude's brainwaves wearing this helmet are making everybody act crazy as soon as the comet shows up. You see the comet right there? Halley's Comet was the shit. It was like all over TV and shit, right? So Superman figures out, ooh, this is just like my neighbor who's super anxious and thinks that it's going to make everybody go crazy. He must have got the helmet. So he busts up into this dude's house, takes the helmet off, gives it to Captain Comet. It gives him back that subconscious ability to revert himself back to the 20th century form, and then he rides and flies up with the helmet and causes everything to go back to normal. Then Brainwave completely just gives up the power back to Captain Comet, because since he stole Captain Comet's powers, he actually evolved out of being a villain and wants to be a benevolent kind of guy and less roguish. But that was basically it in a nutshell. That was one of the very first comic books I ever owned and ever read over and over. DC Comics presents 91 That was DC. In the 80s. So I do still have the original copy I had, but this is not. This is a more recent one I picked up that's a little bit more together. One day I'll find it again. I've showed it off before, but it's just ratty. You can tell how much I read this book. I love these old school books. I love the artwork. I love the smell. Let's get a good sniff. I love it. This is like pre-crisis type stuff, or like right after crisis, during. Let's look at some of these. I remember seeing that ad all the time. Batman and the Outsiders ends. There's a Voltron ad in the back right there. Look at that. Voltron Force, baby. I know some of y'all are Voltron fans. It's Christmas time. This came out in December. It has a cover date of like March 86, but it came out in December. I remember seeing that image of Cadillac. This is when I first started reading comics. Like, I cannot tell y'all how many times I read this book. And, like, never see Captain Comet again. Like, for real. He's used in certain other things, but never see him again. Wow. Yeah, letters pages, y'all. That used to be a thing. I miss the letters pages. Look at that new Booster Gold series coming up. But anyway, Superman and Captain Comet, DC Comics Presents 91. It's just super, super fun. I absolutely love it. So I'm glad I got to flow back in time for that.